It was an early, chilling fall morning when Cassandra's world came to a brutal, sudden halt. The successful businesswoman and a symbol of ambition and power lay crumpled in an alley, blood pouring from her body after a violent encounter with a notorious white gang. They had completed a job for Hero Shady, a illicit task, but when she refused to pay for their services, the consequences were swift and severe. This wasn't the first time Cassandra had played the dangerous game of double-crossing, but this time it would nearly cost her life. The blood that stained the pavement was not just the price of a bad decision. It was the culmination of a life lived in defiance, a life where hate simmered just beneath the surface. The ambulance arrived just in time, and paramedics rushed to stabilize her as she slipped in and out of consciousness. With every passing second, Cassandra's life seemed to hang by a thread. The familiar sounds of an emergency room greeted Cassandra as she was wheeled in. The beeping of heart monitors, the rushed voices of medical staff, and the cold, sterile air seemed like a distant echo to her. In her unconscious state, her mind wandered, drifting back to the memories that had shaped her. Memories that burned with a resentment that would take years to unravel. Cassandra's past wasn't just a series of unfortunate events. It was a tapestry woven with injustice, pain, and anger. She had grown up in a small town, one of the few black families in an overwhelmingly white community. From a young age, the harsh realities of racism were thrust upon her. At school, her peers would laugh at her hair, mock her skin color, and call her names she couldn't fully comprehend at the time. But it wasn't just the children who were cruel, it was the adults too. They avoided her family, crossing the street to avoid interaction, casting sideways glances and whispering insults behind their backs. It was the adults' behavior that shaped Cassandra's earliest memories of the world. She felt like an outsider in every space she entered. No matter how hard she tried to fit in, there was always a wall between her and the rest of the community, a wall built on prejudice and hate. One day, when Cassandra was just 10 years old, the wall of hatred hit her with unrelenting force. She was walking down the stairs at her school, a place where she should have felt safe, when a group of white girls shoved her from behind. She lost her balance, tumbling down the stairs, hitting every single step along the way. Pain radiated through her body as she crashed to the floor, her arm twisting unnaturally beneath her. Her cries for help echoed through the hallways, but no one came to her aid. When a teacher finally found her, she was taken to the hospital, her body aching. But it was the emotional wounds that would leave the deepest scars. The doctor who treated her was also white, glanced at her once and then made a dismissive comment. "My shift's over," he said coldly, before turning and walking away. Cassandra lay there, writhing in pain, but no one helped. It wasn't until a black doctor came in for his shift that Cassandra was finally given the care she needed. That moment of abandonment, the look of indifference from the doctor, seared into her soul and shaped the woman she would become. From that day forward, she vowed never to trust white people again. They were all the same in her ice cruel, dismissive, and filled with hate. Every interaction she had with a white person confirmed her belief that they were all cut from the same cloth. As Cassandra grew older, her bitterness hardened into a deep-seated rage. She moved away from her small town, determined to build a life far removed from the taint of racism. She created a successful online business, selling unique handmade goods. The business grew rapidly, gaining popularity and eventually leading to physical retail stores in 3 different states. She had become wealthy, powerful, and influential, but the success did nothing to soften her heart. If anything, it made her more cynical and bitter. She wielded her wealth as a weapon, often exploiting white employees and partners for her own gain. It was her way of striking back at the world that had hurt her. Every interaction with white people became an opportunity for her to assert her power, to remind them that she was no longer the helpless girl they once bullied. But the anger, the resentment, it was always there, simmering beneath the surface, waiting to boil over. Cassandra's anger wasn't limited to her dealings with white people. She became involved in criminal enterprises, using both black and white gangs to do her dirty work. She wasn't above using people as pawns in her game of power. And when a gang member tried to cross her or challenge her authority, she didn't hesitate to have them eliminated. The white gangs, in particular, were her favorite targets. She saw them as nothing more than tools to be used and discarded when they no longer served her purpose. And when they dared to retaliate, Cassandra showed them no mercy. To her, it was all part of the same game of power and retribution, a game she was determined to win. It was in this world of manipulation and violence that Cassandra's downfall came. She had tried to double-cross one of the white gangs, refusing to pay them for a job they had completed for her. The gang struck back, and Cassandra was left bleeding on the cold ground, stabbed in a fit of rage by one of the gang members. As she lay in the alley, the world fading in and out, Cassandra realized with a startling clarity that the hate she had carried with her for so long had finally caught up with her. It wasn't just the white gang that had brought her to this point, it was her own refusal to let go of the anger that had defined her for years. She had built her empire on hate, and now that same hate had led her to the brink of death. The ambulance arrived just in time. Paramedics worked feverishly to stabilize her as she lost consciousness. The sounds of the hospital filled her ears as she was rushed to the emergency room. But through the haze of pain and fear, Cassandra couldn't escape the memories that haunted her. Faces from her past, both those who had hurt her and those she had hurt in return, flashed before her eyes. Her heart, weak and fragile, hung on by a thread. And then a voice cut through the fog of her minder voice that was calm, yet urgent. "Stay with me," the voice said. "You're going to make it." Cassandra wanted to ask who it was, but her throat was dry, her body too weak to respond. And then everything went dark again. When Cassandra awoke, her body ached as though she had been hit by a truck. Her mind was groggy and her vision blurred. Slowly, she blinked, trying to focus on the figure standing near her bed. As her vision cleared, her heart dropped into her stomach. The man standing in front of her was white. The anger that had lived inside her for so many years flared up once again. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice hoarse. "Get away from Themender." Reynolds, the doctor who had saved her life, stepped back, clearly startled by her sudden outburst. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're safe." But Cassandra didn't hear him. All she could see was his white skin, and all she could feel was the rush of anger that threatened to consume her. "I want a black doctor," she spat, her voice venomous. "Get me a black doctor now." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. The nurses exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to handle the situation. Dr. Reynolds, though hurt, remained composed. He had worked tirelessly to save her life, but now Cassandra wanted nothing to do with him. Without argument, Dr. Reynolds nodded. "I'll see what I can do," he said, and left the room. As Cassandra's mind raced, she couldn't help but feel torn. Her hatred had always been so certain, so all-encompassing. But now, in the face of her vulnerability, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong all along. A black doctor, Dr. Harris, was soon brought in to check on her. Though Cassandra felt more at ease with him, the bitterness in her heart hadn't subsided. For the next few days, she remained in the hospital, physically healing, but emotionally adrift. It wasn't until Dr. Harris sat down beside her one afternoon that she felt something shift. "You know," Dr. Harris began, his voice calm, "Doctor, Reynolds is the reason you're alive today. He didn't stop until he knew you were stable." Cassandra clenched her jaw. "He's white," she muttered bitterly. Dr. Harris sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Yes, he is, and I'm black. But that's not the point, is it? The point is that we're both doctors. We both chose to help people regardless of their skin color." The words stuck, and for the first time in years, Cassandra felt a crack in the fortress of hatred she had built around herself. She wanted to argue, to hold on to the anger that had been her shield for so long. But something inside her, a small, fragile seed, began to doubt. In the days that followed, as Cassandra's wounds healed, so did something deep within her. The journey to forgiveness, to understanding, was not easy. It was slow and painful, but every step brought her closer to the truth. When Cassandra was finally discharged from the hospital, she found Dr. Reynolds in his office, looking over patient files. Without thinking, she approached him. "Dr. Reynolds," she said, her voice softer than it had been in years. "Thank you for saving my life." He looked up, surprised to see her. His expression softened. I am just glad you're okay. Cassandra hesitated before speaking again. I was wrong, she said quietly. Not all white people are the same. I see that now. Dr. Reynolds smiled, a warmth in his eyes. Healing isn't just physical, Cassandra. I'm glad to see you healing inside as well. As Cassandra left the hospital that day, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The journey ahead would not be easy. There were still battles to fight, still scars to heal, but for the first time in a long while, she felt free. Free from the chains of hatred that had held her for so many years. Her journey toward redemption had only just begun, and it promised to be a path filled with both difficulty and reward.